Russia's leader, Vladimir Putin, continues to present himself as the strong and unshakable man of the nation, the iron figure who stands above all challenges and controls every aspect of his country. But the truth behind that image tells a very different story. Because today, Putin is not only facing enormous pressure on the battlefield in Ukraine, but also inside his own country. His grip on power, once thought to be absolute, is slowly weakening. Even major Western media outlets, such as The Telegraph, are now reporting growing fears of a political revolt inside the Kremlin. In this video, we're going to take a close look at the situation inside Russia. Why is Putin under so much pressure? Who could challenge his rule? And what might happen when his system finally begins to collapse? Let's break it down step by step. If we listen to Russian state media, everything in Russia sounds perfect. The army is making progress, the economy is stable, and the Kremlin is supposedly in complete control. According to their narrative, the so-called special military operation in Ukraine is running smoothly, and despite Western sanctions, Russia's economy is thriving. But that story is pure propaganda, and the reality looks far worse. Because the truth is that Russia is currently struggling with one crisis after another, and many of these problems can no longer be solved, no matter how much the Kremlin Triesto hide them. Let's start with the most obvious one: money. Russia is running out of cash. The war in Ukraine is draining the country's resources at a staggering rate. To keep soldiers fighting, the Kremlin is spending billions on bonuses, salaries, and compensation payments. Recent data shows that in the first half of 2025, Russia's spending on military personnel alone reached 2 trillion rubles. That's around 25 billion US dollars. This massive increase in costs is driven by recruitment bonuses, rising wages, and payouts to families of wounded and fallen soldiers. If this continues, total personnel costs could exceed 4 trillion rubles by the end of 2025, roughly 9.5% of all planned federal spending and around 2% of the country's entire GDP. That is an enormous amount of money for a nation that is already struggling under heavy sanctions and declining revenues. At the same time, the Kremlin's recruitment policy relies heavily on financial incentives. Soldiers are promised large one-time payments for signing contracts and high monthly salaries for serving at the front. But here's the problem: the money for these payments is running out fast. Across many Russian regions, the promised bonuses for new recruits are being drastically cut. In some areas, payments have been reduced from several million rubles to just a few 100,000. For example, in Tatarstan, one of the regions with the highest number of casualties, the enlistment bonus was quietly reduced from 2.7 million rubles to 400,000. In other regions like Mari El and Chuvashia, the cuts were just as dramatic. Even in Bashkortostan, the region with the largest number of fallen soldiers, bonuses dropped from 1.6 million to 1 million rubles. These cuts show just how desperate the financial situation has become. Local budgets are running deficits, and the federal government can no longer cover all the costs of this war. According to reports, regional deficits already exceed 700 billion rubles, and that number keeps rising. But the problem goes far beyond the military. Russia's private economy is collapsing. Many businesses are struggling to survive as the state drains all resources into the war effort. Rising wages in the defense industry, which have more than doubled in just 2 years, have created massive distortions in the labor market. Skilled workers are leaving civilian industries to work in weapons factories or join the army, where the pay is better. Meanwhile, countless smaller companies are being forced to cut costs or reduce working hours. Others are closing completely. Unemployment is rising, while inflation continues to erode the purchasing power of ordinary Russians. In short, the Kremlin is spending itself into bankruptcy. The situation becomes even more alarming when we look at Russia's oil and gas sector, the cornerstone of its economy and the single most important source of state revenue. This sector is now under attack from two sides: Ukrainian drone strikes and Western sanctions. Ukraine's long-range attacks have repeatedly hit oil refineries deep inside Russia, setting them ablaze and disrupting production. At the same time, the latest US sanctions have targeted Russian oil giants directly, severely restricting their ability to trade internationally. As a result, the share price of Lukoil, Russia's second-largest oil company, has dropped to around $59 per share, a sharp decline compared to earlier months. But even more devastating is the fact that Lukoil is now being forced to sell its international assets, accepting an offer from the global commodity trader Gunvor. This move, caused by new US sanctions, means that Russia is effectively liquidating parts of its foreign economy. That might seem like a technical business transaction, but in reality, it's a disaster. Because when Russia sells off its foreign holdings, it loses access to hard currency, dollars, euros, yuan, the very lifeblood that keeps its economy alive. Without that foreign currency, Russia's financial system becomes increasingly isolated. The ruble loses value, imports become more expensive, and inflation accelerates. According to the US Treasury Department, real inflation in Russia has already surpassed 20%. And despite Moscow's claims of economic stability, growth is near zero. Russia's oil revenues have fallen by at least 20% compared to 2024, and analysts warn they could drop another 20 to 30% this year. In other words, Russia is printing worthless money while its most valuable industry burns. This economic collapse has a direct impact on Putin's political stability. The war is eating through the national budget, sanctions are cutting off access to global markets, and foreign investors have all but disappeared. As a result, the Kremlin is now running a budget deficit of nearly $100 billion, a massive hole that continues to grow month after month. For a country that depends so heavily on oil exports, this is a financial nightmare. And Putin knows it. Faced with these challenges, the Russian president has turned his focus inward. Instead of investing in the economy or trying to end the war, he is spending more money on propaganda and internal security. For 2026, the Kremlin has increased propaganda spending by 54%, and at the same time, Putin is rapidly expanding the power of the National Guard, known as the Rosgvardia. Originally created as a heavily armed police force, the Rosgvardia is now being transformed into a private army loyal only to Putin himself. It is being equipped with tanks, artillery, and heavy weapons, not for the war in Ukraine, but for use inside Russia. This shows clearly where Putin's priorities now lie. He no longer fears NATO or the Ukrainian army, he fears his own people. At the same time, Putin has become increasingly isolated. According to multiple reports, he rarely stays in Moscow anymore. Instead, he spends most of his time in his private residence in Valdai, roughly 380 kilometers from the capital. There, he is surrounded by the Rosgvardia and protected by air defense systems normally deployed at the front. These precautions reveal a deep paranoia. Putin understands that his system is cracking, and he fears that one day the danger will come not from abroad, but from within the Kremlin itself. And he has every reason to be afraid. Inside Russia's ruling elite, power struggles are already intensifying. The so-called Siloviki, the powerful men from the military, the intelligence services, and the security apparatus, are preparing for the post-Putin era. They can all sense that the president's power is weakening. They see the chaos, the economic decline, the social unrest, and they know that this cannot go on forever. When a leader begins to show weakness, those beneath him start to position themselves for what comes next. We've seen this before in history. In every autocracy, power begins to crumble from within before it collapses from the outside. A clear warning sign came in 2023 during the short-lived mutiny led by Yevgeny Prigozhin and his Wagner forces. When Prigozhin's convoy advanced toward Moscow, almost no one stopped him. The army, the police, and even the National Guard all stood aside. The Russian population too did not resist. That moment exposed a frightening truth. If a real uprising were to happen, Putin might find himself completely alone. Today, that scenario feels closer than ever. The Moscow stock market has fallen below 2,500 points, signaling deep investor anxiety. The economy is stagnating and public frustration is rising. At the same time, Putin's health and limited public appearances have fueled speculation about his physical and political weakness. Whether those rumors are true or not doesn't even matter anymore. What matters is that people around him believe them. In politics, perception often becomes reality. And when those within the Kremlin begin to see Putin as weak, that's when his downfall truly begins. In the end, the question is no longer if Putin's power will collapse, but when. Russia is heading toward a period of instability unlike anything it has seen in decades. The combination of war, sanctions, economic decline, and growing internal distrust is pushing the system toward a breaking point. Putin built his rule on fear, loyalty, and control. But now fear is turning against him. His loyal circle is shrinking. His economy is crumbling. And his people are growing restless. The empire he created is starting to devour itself. So what happens next? Will the Kremlin see an internal power struggle? A coup? Or a slow erosion of control until the system finally collapses under its own weight? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain. Putin's Russia is not as stable as it looks. Behind the walls of the Kremlin, tension is rising, and sooner or later, that tension will break. What do you think? How long can Putin hold on to power? And what will Russia look like after he's gone? Share your thoughts in the comments, leave a like if you found this analysis helpful, and don't forget to subscribe for future updates. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and see you next time.